I don't want to be strong like man who look pretty. I want to be strong like bitch that fight bears in the forest.
Welcome to another episode of Bitch vs. Bear with your hosts, me, Amber, my bestie, Sydney. Woohoo! We are co-owners of Shield Maiden Training Co., and this is a show where we bitch, laugh, and chat about all things fitness and wellness related to women and the LGBTQIA plus community.
That is correct. That is
get 'em all?
exactly
I
what
got
we
'em
do.
all.
I like that our guest was sitting with their hands in front of their face, not to giggle when I went, woohoo! It was amazing. I loved
cute.
it. It was very cute. So we are doing, because it's June, we're doing a Pride series, because, like, you know, gay.
Is this gonna be our first episode of June?
I think so.
Might as well.
Why not? Yes!
All right. First episode of Pride Month.
Whee! Yay! And we're going to be shining a spotlight on individuals who are making a difference in the various fields while embracing their true selves. And I don't know anybody better who fits that description. So today we have a very special returning guest who I would say embodies resilience, dedication, and ultimately the spirit of pride.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
100%.
That's so nice.
So, in case you couldn't tell, joining us today is Lauren.
Hello.
Lauren is a remarkable medical student who is not only navigating the challenging world of med school, but is also a proud member of the queer community. Woohoo!
Woo.
Lauren is
This
great.
whole episode is just woo girls.
It's just wahoos.
We turn into woo girls during Pride.
Yeah.
My neighbors are going to love that.
Yeah.
So Lauren has very graciously agreed to come on the show and share her journey, experiences, and insights on what it means to be queer in the medical field. Mm-hmm. Great. Awesome. Well, welcome back, Lauren.
Phenomenal. I had a great time last time. I was waiting for another invitation. Here I am.
Here I am. I know, it took us a while to get you back on. It's
Yeah.
because you're so busy.
Yeah.
You're so popular.
That and I need to set aside like a week to edit our episode.
I do talk a lot and take very few breaths. So
Yeah, I'm going to need you to breathe a little more on this
Okay.
episode.
I'm going to talk more slowly and take more breaths.
It's development. We like it. Like, we're all about that.
What I loved was that two things from the last episode was Shelby's dad had listened to it, and when I went to y'all's competition, he sat next to me. He's like, I thought your episode was so insightful. I really liked what you had to say. I was like, Shelby's dad, that's so nice. And then I met one of y'all's friends, and they're like, oh yeah, Lauren from the podcast. I'm like, oh my god, I'm famous.
You're bitch versus bear famous.
I am.
I love it. You are famous.
I
You are.
had a great time.
We had a great time too.
Yeah.
We're
it was
very
lots of fun.
excited.
All right. Let's dive in.
All right. So to get us started, can you share a bit about your journey and like how you came to identify as queer and what inspired you to pursue a career in medicine?
Yes.
Two big questions.
Big questions. Yes.
Don't forget to breathe.
I will take plenty of breaths.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I'll start with saying that I'm an MD PhD student. So
I didn't know how to write that in there that made sense to like most people without explaining it, and I was like, well, Lauren can just
I'll
explain what
probably
that
explain
is.
it. Yes. So I'm an MD PhD student, which means that within about 8 years, I'm concurrently completing an MD, my medical degree, as well as a PhD. And the way that those are usually structured is you do your first 2 years of medical school, which are mostly classroom based. And then you take your first boards exam, and then you kind of take a break to do your PhD, your graduate phase. And that's where I am now. I'm about halfway through my PhD, which is in immunology. I'm focusing on tumor immunology and immunotherapy. And then you defend your dissertation, and then you go back and do your last 2 years of medical school, which are the clinical rotations. And so ever since I was like a young teenager, like 12, 13, I knew I wanted to do something in medicine. My dad was a paramedic. My mom was a PhD, and she ran the molecular diagnostics laboratory at the hospital in our hometown.
Okay.
So that's like, if you need any sort of, if doctors order genetic testing, or it's mostly a lot of genetic testing for molecular diagnostics. That's what she did. She ran that lab. And so I was in and around the hospital a lot as a kid, and I really liked the environment, which a lot of people look at me very strangely when I say I like being in the hospital.
Fair,
But
yes.
yeah, I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was probably like 12 or 13. And then that's what I decided I was going to do. And so all through like middle and high school, I was doing the ridiculous stuff that is required of you to be a good applicant to medical school, which gets harder and harder every year and is atrocious. But yeah, I was an EMT. I was a ski patrol in high school and college. And then when I was in college, I joined a neuroscience research lab because one of my bachelor's degrees is in neuroscience. And so I knew that doing research was going to look really good for medical school. And so I joined a research lab, and within a year, I'd really fallen in love with research as well. And my PI, my boss in the lab, was also my academic advisor. And I came to her so upset after a year. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because I really love research. I've learned to really love this. But I also can't imagine a career without patient care. So I don't know what to do. And she's like, well, there are programs for people who are indecisive.
And maybe just a bit overachieving.
Yeah. Raging overachiever. Yeah. These combined dual degree MD PhD programs. And so after I learned about that, I had set my brain to that's what I was going to do. And so that's what I did. And here I am. So I'm about halfway through my program now. I'm like 4 years into the 8 or 9 that it's going to take.
Oof.
I mean, yes, long road, but I get a complete tuition waiver and a stipend through the whole thing. So going
That's
to med
awesome.
school for free is, kind of worth it.
That's a sweet deal. Yeah.
Yes. So, the recognizing my queerness came after the knowledge that I wanted to do medicine. It wasn't really until I was in college that I found terminology for it. So, as I've been reflecting on my bisexuality, I've been looking into my childhood with like that sort of lens over my vision, and I don't know how I didn't know. I don't know how I didn't know for so long, because NCIS was one of my favorite shows, and I didn't realize until much, much too late that the reason I loved it so much was because the actress who plays Ziva David, her name's Cote Pablo, I was watching it for her. And I didn't realize that until like many, many years later. And as I was like thinking about it more, my first kiss was with one of my girlfriends.
I'm gonna segue just a bit. Hold on. I knew much earlier on because I was watching Dawson's Creek for Joey. Like just
We all.
right? See,
Joey
like,
and
so,
Pacey.
like I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, I had my biggest crushes usually on like girls in my grade or female actresses and stuff, but I also was attracted to men, and that's what was normal. And so I thought that that's just what everybody did. That was everybody's experience. And even though I grew up in Washington State, which is very well known to be liberal and like LGBTQIA plus like central,
Very progressive.
very progressive, mostly in the Seattle area. That's not where I grew up. I grew up in the eastern side of the state, which is actually mostly desert and like arid and semi-arid, but also much more conservative, Republican, farmland sort of vibe over there. And so even though we had a GSA at my high school, a Gay Straight Alliance, I didn't know very many out queer people. There were a couple of like out gay students at my school, but no one who really was bisexual. I did not hear that term until college. And so, yeah, in high school, I like strictly dated guys, and into the beginning of college, I had a feeling that I was not straight because I had this conversation with one of my female friends where I was like, oh yeah, I have this crush on so-and-so, one of our other friends. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What do I mean?
Like it's a
Like,
crush.
do you
Clarifying.
do you
I
not-
need some clarity around.
do you not just like have crushes on your female friends? And she's like, no. I was like, oh my God. That was the first time I realized that was not a universal experience.
I mean, they have a whole song about it. It's a girl crush. It's fine.
But yeah, so it wasn't until I went to college, which was in the Seattle area. It was in a very liberal. I went to a liberal arts college. I went to Western Washington University, which is like very queer. In the woods, loved it. It was the best. Yeah, but I didn't really start.
Where do the queers go? The woods.
Yeah.
Obviously.
But it wasn't until I was around more people who had similar experiences to me that I really got the terminology to describe and understand the experience that I was having. And it was really difficult for me to approach talking about it to my family. All of my friends knew at school, and I was very...
Well, it sounds like you kind of inadvertently came out to them without meaning to or realizing that that's what you were doing.
What do you mean you don't have a crush on all of... Okay, that's just me? By the way, I'm bi.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a pixie cut. I dressed very...
Amber, it's okay. Come to the dark side. We have coffee. Like, it's
I
fine.
provided the coffee.
You had a pixie cut when I first met you, too.
That's true.
Yeah, I had a pixie cut. I wore a lot of button downs. I wore a lot of fedoras, which is just kind of... It's just kind of like high school in the early, like, 2010s. Like,
That's
fedoras
fair, yeah.
was really a thing.
That was a thing.
But, like, I've been showing my current friends now who have only gotten to know me in the recent years, who did not know me back then, showing them pictures from high school. They're like, how did you not know that you were gay? Yes, very funny. So, yeah, so I felt really, I felt like I really understood myself better in college, being around people, especially around, women who also identified as bisexual and relating to their experiences and stuff. I learned a lot about myself, and all of my friends knew. I told my sisters. Actually, I had like a whole big thing. I was in the airport with my younger sister, and I was like really trying to like get it out and like tell her that I was bisexual, and I finally told her after like half an hour. She's like, oh, I know. And I'm like, what do you mean you know? She's like, I saw you texting that girl at Christmas. I was like, okay. But it was my parents who were the last to know. And it was Pride Month of my senior year of college. And I just like was struck with the bravery, I guess, to call my parents. And so I FaceTimed them and told them that I was bisexual. I didn't tell my grandparents because I thought that they would have like an aneurysm simultaneously, the both of them.
Yeah.
But I did end up marrying a man, which is very lucky for my family. And actually, I was thinking about this recently, is that I think I talked about this last time I recorded with you guys too, that I now much more relate to more of like a gay title rather than bisexual, because my preference is very strongly women. I just happen to marry a man.
I think we did talk about that last time.
Yeah.
And he's great. Like, he grew up in the South, but I feel like we should have him on one time, because I feel like he wasn't really exposed to very many gay people. He had never dated a queer person before me, and he has learned so much and has become such an advocate. He stood up for me to a doctor that he was working with in the clinic one time. I don't know how it came up that I was bisexual, and this fellow was like, well, how do you know she's not going to cheat on you? Like, the very, like, biphobic sort of questions.
Yeah.
And he learned so much from our discussions that he stood up for me to this person,
Aw.
and I was so proud of him. He's
Your
he's such
husband
an
is
advocate.
he is the A in ally.
Yes,
he
he really is.
he really is.
He's incredible. He's the best.
Aw.
He is the best.
We love
He's
Cole.
very cool.
We do.
Yeah.
All right. Little long-winded, but it's okay. I think it was exactly where we needed to go. So,
Okay.
my question for you is, actually, I'm going to skip down, or you can skip down, Amber, because I think that segues really well into that.
Into our balancing identities
Yes.
question series. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you balance the demanding schedule of med school with your personal life and identity as a queer individual?
Great question.
Yeah, thanks, Sid.
It's a phenomenal question. Yeah. I feel like, especially in medicine, one of the questions that is most often asked is work-life balance. How do you balance such a demanding schedule with the rest of your life? And I feel like what I've learned is there really is no perfect balance. There's always something in that moment that takes precedent. And sometimes it's work. Sometimes there's a big exam coming up you have to study for. You have to set everything aside for it. Like, obviously taking small moments to continue to, like, be a human and not just be a study machine. But I mean, when I was doing my first 2 years of medical school, there were times that I missed birthday parties and I missed weddings, or I missed things at home because I had to stay at school and do schoolwork. Like, the most notable time that this happened was my best friend from childhood, who's also bisexual. We came out to each other on the same day. It was hilarious.
That's adorable.
Anyway, she was the photographer at my wedding, and I was a bridesmaid in hers, and I couldn't go to her wedding because I had a thing at school I had to stay for. And that was super heartbreaking because we had been talking since we were 14 about being in each other's weddings, and I couldn't go to hers. And that's just the nature of the beast sometimes. So I feel like the balance between the very busy medical school schedule and, like, personal life and doing personal things is a constant evaluation of what is the most important thing in that moment. What is really nice is that Richmond is a pretty liberal, progressive city, and VCU as a medical school is a pretty progressive one. Something that I really appreciate that VCU does is you can go on the VCU School of Medicine's website and they have an out list, and it is a list of all of the faculty, staff, and students at VCU who are out and proud, and they have a whole list with their pictures and what their like what they do, and their pronouns and their identification, or what they identify as, and that is really cool. I have not seen a lot of medical schools do that. Obviously, I can only speak to my experience at VCU as a medical school, but that was really, really cool that you know, the American healthcare system has not, and still does not, look very kindly on the LGBTQIA plus community, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And seeing that when I started here was really awesome. That all of these physicians and staff members and other students were really proud to be public in their identification, and I really think it helps patients. The out list actually was developed because there was this medical student who really dedicated himself to advocating for LGBTQIA plus patients and their experiences, and integrating learning about that patient subset in our medical education. And it was him discussing with medical school leadership, I guess, that created the out list. That's how it was
that's cool.
developed. Yeah. So patients are able to access that list, and I feel like I haven't been in that position, the patient position, but I feel like if I were a patient and had negative experiences with the medical system previously, especially with not having providers that I identify with, and seeing that they proudly displayed, you know, this list of providers and students and staff that are proud of their identification, like that would be really comforting to me, feeling like I would be seen as a entire person. Yes, and so I have several friends in my medical school class who are queer in one way or another, and it is a very welcoming environment to be queer, getting my medical education. And so I feel like I didn't really have to balance or find some way to honor my queer identity, because I felt so safe to be who I was in my education.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that VCU does really well.
That's amazing.
So
Plug for VCU.
plug for VCU.
Right? Oh, that's so cool.
That is cool. Yeah, I didn't know about the list. Like, I think that's such a good way, because, you know, we've talked to friends and family who, you know, they're in the community and they're like, I've struggled with finding providers, or I've had to switch providers because, you know, one instance of something happening and all of a sudden I was no longer viewed as like this whole individual. It was like, this is the thing and we don't support that thing. So good luck, Godspeed.
Yeah, still unfortunately really, really common experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have any advice that you would give to other queer individuals considering a career in medicine, besides just go to VCU?
That is a really, really good question. I'm sure that there are plenty of other medical schools that do not focus on educating future doctors on LGBTQ issues. So, you know, it's not a huge part of our education, but we do get some training on like common issues that LGBTQ patients can be experiencing that would kind of force them to come and get medical care, and listening to patients foremost has become a really central part, I think, of modern medical education. And that's something that VCU also does well, I think. We learn to really listen to what patients are saying and to not draw conclusions immediately from just what their paperwork says their chief complaint is, especially because it's really common that patients will come in for one thing. It's called the door handle butt, I think. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they come in for one thing, they tell you about it, you have your whole experience in the exam room, and then the doctor has their door or their hand on the door handle, and they're also one more thing. And that's usually where whatever they were actually coming in for, or something that they were too embarrassed to talk about, like, finally comes out. And we're really trained to listen and to try to think of each patient as a whole person with all of their identities, and not just the physical medical issue that they're coming in with. And so we get some education on issues that a lot of LGBTQ patients come in with. So the thing that comes to mind foremost for me, which is still a problem, especially with all of this anti-trans media and legislature that's been coming out recently, is that gender affirming care for trans individuals, especially minors, is more and more difficult to find.
I bet.
And something that we, in our like kind of one lecture about transgender patients, which we needed more than one lecture, but at least we got a lecture.
At least we got one.
Like it was, the lecture started out with how many trans people end up committing suicide or going years and years and years without gender affirming care, and how much worse that is physically and mental health wise, and how poor their quality of life is if they cannot get gender affirming care. And they gave a lot of stats, and there have been a lot of studies, and if patients are able to get gender affirming care from like preteen, very young age, that does wonders, shockingly,
Imagine that.
for them as a person and their physical well-being, the health of their body and their mind, even if it's not hormone replacement therapy or gender reassignment surgery, even just being called your name of choice or the correct pronouns does wonders for a person in all aspects of their life. And so
Shocker.
Something that we were trained to do from the very beginning is when you're introducing yourself to a patient is to say what your pronouns are, ask for their preferred pronouns, and understand that that is new for a lot of people. And if someone's not comfortable with that, being given the language to express to a patient that it's okay if you don't want to say, whatever it is. And so, yeah, we were trained from the very beginning to ask for the patient's preferred name, because you walk in and you say the name that's on their chart, and you're like, is that what you would like to be called? What would you prefer to be called? Is there something I can put in your chart to say that this is actually your preferred name? There's like spots to put preferred pronouns and stuff. And so I really hope that we're not the only medical school that does that. And that this new generation of doctors that are graduating from school in the next several years is going to have those tools to understand, even if they don't identify as queer or in the LGBTQ community, that they have the tools available to them to give like gender affirming care for trans patients, or to recognize that people have different sexual identifications. That is a big part of who they are and core to their personality, and to honor that and respect that and include that in how they view their patient as a whole, to hopefully make medicine less scary and less terrible for a lot of LGBTQIA patients.
That would be nice.
That's going to be the tagline. Trying to make
Medicine
less terrible. Okay,
yeah.
so I guess my question is, has there been any specific moments like in your education or training that you now have been able to reflect on and kind of highlight as like, oh, that was an important moment for queer representation? Like, you're like, I'm finally sitting in a lecture where we're talking about something that is like, this is actually really important for the 100 other people in this lecture, because this might not be something that's their normal kind of community that they run in, because obviously you run in a slightly different circle.
In a very gay circle.
Yes.
That one lecture on transgender care.
The one lecture on transgender care.
Which is still better than just
Nothing.
pretending they don't exist.
I think something that was really, really helpful during our education was we have this one longitudinal course that we take through the entirety of medical school called Physician, Patient, and Society. And it is like once a week, I think we would have that, where we discussed, how physician-patient relationships impact quality of medical care, what a physician's role is in service to the community as a whole, and just like understanding the human aspect of medicine, because I think it's pretty common for many doctors of the older generation to see a patient come in and see them as the physical and medical problem that they have, that they're trying to fix. It's a puzzle that you're trying to fix. And
The image that I got in my mind was like, I walk through the door and they just see like, kidney. Like, that's the thing you're struggling with. You're just a giant walking kidney. Like, which is funny that I picked kidney because, you know, Sydney kidney, kind of funny. But yeah, like that description, I'm like, oh, I could see that. Like, where you just become that thing. You're not the whole person.
yeah, you're just the physical problem that you're coming in that the physician is trying to solve. And it is very, very well known and well studied that practicing medicine that way usually has poorer outcomes than viewing your patient as a whole person with multiple identities and aspects to them that is not physical, that you can't just see. Like one of the examples that I think of is so people going through oncology care, people with cancer. There have been several studies done that show that people who are religious, who have lots of visits from family and friends, lots of, you know, emotional support, have significantly better outcomes than people who are not religious, who do not have a lot of support from friends and family, who are not visited very often in the hospital. They have significantly worse outcomes.
There's a correlation. Like,
Yeah.
if you, I wonder if it's like, you know, that whole, like, I have something to live for. Like, these people are counting on me. Like, they're, you know, whether that's, you know, you're a mom and all your family's coming in and all of your, you know, like, community and things like that. I can picture that person who doesn't have a ton of that and being like, well,
Nobody's going to care.
Yeah, nobody's going to care. And then to like that kind of like drive to like, you know, do better. I think it's kind of an innate one in all humans of like, well, if I have these people relying on me or, you know, like I want to get out and I want to go do the things that I love to do. Like if you don't have that, like, you're like, well, okay.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is that you could have two groups of people who have the same cancer, getting the same treatment, physically, for all intents and purposes, are identical. And one is supported emotionally with whether that's their faith or their family and friends or, you know, whatever it is that's boosting them emotionally. And the other group does not have that. Their emotional needs are not also being treated along with their physical needs. There's a significant difference in their outcome. And so that just goes to show that when you're treating medical conditions in patients, you can't just treat the physical body and the medical issue that needs to be fixed. You have to support the emotional and just mental other identities that a person has, because a person is not just their body and their conditions, it's also their emotions and mental health and all of that. So I actually wrote an essay when I was in college talking about how, because so my bachelor's degrees are in neuroscience and philosophy, and so I wrote this. I know, very.
She's so heady.
So
Such an overachiever.
I wrote this essay for a philosophy scholarship that was talking about how it is imperative to treat patients as a whole, as whole people, and not just their physical condition. And I, you know, stated all of these studies that show that practicing medicine that way results in significantly greater outcomes, better outcomes, and I ended up winning that scholarship.
Of course you did.
So yes, all of that to say that it's very important as practitioners to understand patients not just as the physical issue that needs to be solved, but also their identities, where they are emotionally, their mental health, because all of those things, feeling like you're seen as an LGBTQIA patient, feeling like your doctor or provider cares about your mental health, how you're coping, how you're faring outside of the medical office. All of those are so important for patients having good outcomes. And so increased education in medical schools with learning how to, even if you don't identify with the queer community, being able to recognize that in your patient, that that's important to them, and learning how to support them in that way, as well as, you know, emotionally and mentally, that's just good medicine.
Yep.
That's how you take care of your patient as an entire patient, and that's how outcomes are better, and people actually go to the doctor for the things they need to go to the doctor for.
We just solved so many things. Like in that whole thing, I'm like, if all of the physicians could just listen to that right there, it's like this is how we do better. Like patients have better outcomes if you just like see them as whole people, and done. Like
Yeah,
stamp.
like
Doctors just need to be good allies.
yes, I am fortunate in that I have not had this experience when I have gone and in search of medical care, but I have many friends and acquaintances and patients that I've had who have told me stories about going to the doctor and having them dead name them into the crowd. You sit in the waiting room, and you know, your name that was on your birth certificate is what's on your medical chart, and that's what's called into the room, and how terrible that can feel, you know, as told to me by people who have experienced that, or how awkward or uncomfortable it feels to tell your provider that that's not the name that you go by, or these are not the pronouns that you use. And them not hearing that and not changing it in your chart, and things like that, or like, you know, not recognizing your sexual preference as valid, or essentially invalidating a big part of your identity. People tend to then not go back to the doctor or any sort of provider, not get medical help, and end up having medical issues lifelong or for very long periods of time that could be solved if they felt comfortable going to the doctor and feeling seen and getting medical treatment. There's so many people, especially women and then LGBTQIA patients, who just don't go to the doctor when they should and end up suffering for a long time because they just don't feel heard or seen when they go try to get medical care. And that is really a huge injustice, one of the biggest injustices that we have in the the American healthcare system, is this just like complete ignorance a lot of the time towards issues that, you know, women have specifically, and then, you know, anyone in the LGBTQIA community.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done whole month long, like that's the theme, is like, the American healthcare system, how we're failing women in the LGBTQ.
A lot. We're failing them a lot.
In a lot of different ways. Okay, so pivoting, probably one of the last kind of direct questions that I'm going to ask is, maybe let me rephrase that. What would you suggest folks do to kind of advocate for themselves, being somebody who is queer and also in the field, knowing like maybe some tips and tricks that people are like, hey, I haven't had great experiences. How can I help myself try and have better experiences? Like, what should they be looking for? Clearly, they should go to VCU and look at the
the out list.
The out list. That's a good tip and trick that I did not know. But yeah, like any other things that you were like, oh, this would be great if they could do this, because it gives us a heads up.
Yeah. I feel like I said this before, where I'm very privileged in that I have not had the experience of having negative interactions with providers because of my identity. And because of that, I don't know if I am the greatest person to ask for, at least from the patient point of view. I think I cannot speak well to how patients should, or how people should find providers that are more identity affirming. But from the practitioner point of view, me personally, I really benefit from if I say the wrong name, or if I neglect asking for pronouns, which I try not to do. Having my patient be brave enough to correct me is something that I really, really appreciate, because I know me in my practice, I want to make sure that my patient feels as comfortable as possible with me, because when you have that trust in your provider, that's how you're able to get the best medical care, because you trust them to tell them the things that are going on. Because the things that you tell your doctor or your provider are really personal, can be really embarrassing, and it's difficult to be that open and honest and vulnerable with anybody. And if you don't feel safe with them, you're not going to tell them all of the things that you have going on. And so, like I was saying, I think that medical education is changing for the better, where a lot of us are getting education in how to ask for, what would you like me to call you? What are your preferred pronouns? Let me put them in your chart, so that the next time you come to this practice or somewhere that has your medical chart, you don't have to have this conversation again. What you prefer is already, in your chart. And so having patients be brave enough to tell me that I said their name wrong, or it's not their preferred name, or it's not their preferred pronouns, and asking me to change it in their chart is something that I really appreciate and I respect.
It's almost like if they look at you like a human too, then it goes much better. Like if everybody's just like, hey, we're human, and we all have these things that go on, like, yeah, just as I look at you and know that you're a human and not a walking kidney. It's, yeah, I think that's kind of like us as patients have to come in and be like, my doctor's also human.
Yeah. And like sometimes they, glance at a chart, make a mistake. I mean, hopefully not like in the actual medical care, but like in my name or pronouns or something.
Yeah.
Like, fine, no big deal. Like, correct them. The problem, I think, comes right when the doctors or whoever continues to make that mistake even after being corrected.
Yeah. And
I think the key point that you made was asking your doctor to make that note in the chart and be like, write it down, man.
yeah. Yeah. And I almost hate to say it that way, because that puts essentially all of the responsibility on patients to advocate for themselves, and that can be really difficult, especially if you're young.
Well, I think, I mean, the point you made was to correct you if you did get it wrong. I think it is still on the physician, the person coming into that room and introducing themselves, to then ask, like, reciprocally, what is your deal? How should I address you? And then, if they then get it wrong, mispronounce it, whatever, correcting them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it should be on the patient to
establish that.
Yeah, like I feel like the doctor should be asking.
Yeah, and like I said, that's how we were trained.
Which I love.
Was to you walk in, you want to make sure you have the correct patient, because one of the biggest HIPAA violations is if you walk into an exam room and you have the wrong patient chart pulled up and you just start talking about whatever this person's deal is and it's not the right patient. So you have to go in and say, like, can you tell me your name? Or
okay, I have to ask, has that ever happened to you?
That has not happened to me.
Okay, I just needed to know.
But
but this is the whole premise of a show. Have you seen that Jane the Virgin?
Yes, I have seen
like
that.
It's the whole premise is they didn't ask and she just went in and like inseminated somebody.
Yeah. Yes. So I mean, yes. That has happened. Not to me, thank God. But yes, so you have to go in and you have to confirm that this is the correct patient. And if your name in your chart is what's on your birth certificate and that's not what you identify with, like, unfortunately, that's what the provider is going to come in and call you. And so, yes, I really like that. We were taught to say, identify it's the correct patient. Is this what you want me to call you? Is this what you prefer? And if it's not, tell me that and I'll put it in your chart and ask for your preferred, like, I'll give you my pronouns, you give me your pronouns back. There's this line of professionalism and sharing enough about yourself personally to make your patient feel comfortable. And so a lot of the older generation of doctors really holds fast to that line of professionalism. Like, they go in and they're your doctor and that's what they are to you. And it's not appropriate to share anything personal. And that's not how I like to practice myself.
Shocker.
Like, I know that when I go in as a patient, or when I'm in therapy, or if I'm talking to a stranger, I feel most comfortable when other people share something personal about themselves that shows that they understand me or have experienced what I'm experiencing, or, you know, just that they're a person as well. And there is obviously a line. You can't overshare. That's also
What the podcast is for.
yeah. Not getting too attached emotionally, or like, not having inappropriate relationships with your patients by sharing too much. That is a line that you can't cross. But I have found, especially when I am treating teenagers, is that sharing something, being a little bit more casual, sharing something that's not deeply personal, but, is something personal about you, really gets patients to kind of calm down and feel comfortable and want to share more with you than they would have otherwise. And so one of the things that I do, a lot of the doctors that I work with do, and a lot of the medical students that are currently in school at VCU, is we have pins that have the gay pride flag as well as the trans flag that says "You're safe with me."
I have one of those.
We have them at the gym.
Have them at the gym. Yeah, I got mine from the gym. A lot of people are putting that pin either on their lanyard that has their badge or on the lapel of their coat. Lots of providers now are wearing some sort of LGBTQIA safe pin, so that even if they don't say it verbally, that is an indication to patients that this is somebody that you can share that part of your identity with, that will be open to listening to all of the problems that you have, physical, mental, emotional, whatever it is, with whatever identity that your issue is currently with. And I think, like, even though when I personally have gone to the doctor, my bisexuality isn't really something that interferes or is a big component of my medical problems, it still makes me feel safer with that provider, knowing, just like a visual cue, that provider, if it were to be something that I needed to bring up, would be open to hearing about it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that. I do like the pins.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I like the visual cues.
Unfortunately, there are some older generation, not even older generation, mostly older generation, but also unfortunately, some newer doctors that are not so open to those things. And it is really unfortunate. It puts more work on patients to switch providers to find somebody who you feel comfortable with. This is kind of I'm shining some negative light on VCU right now. But when I was an M1, when I was a first year medical student, and we were, first being trained to ask people for their preferred pronouns and, what they would like to be called, like saying that we can put that in their chart, XYZ, when we were doing that with our standardized patients, learning how to do physical exams, there was this group of students, mostly M1 and M2 students, mostly on the heavily religious side, not everybody, but that was a theme, who wrote a letter to the medical school leadership that God does not make mistakes, that the body that someone was born into is correct, that they are not going to be asking what their patient's preferred pronoun is, because that's not how they view humans. That essentially is a lot of transphobia slander. that is not something that they will be continuing to do during their education, because that's not how they view people. And it was infuriating. I feel like that is I had a very negative reaction to where I thought that those people should not be allowed to finish medical school, because
Absolutely not.
That is so harmful to patients who are going to require that of them in the future, and they're not going to do it.
How? Okay. So, hold on. I have a lot of questions.
hang on, let me finish the story real fast. So this was so we had a group chat in our medical school class of the openly LGBTQIA students, and we talked a lot as a group and how we wanted to come as a unified front to medical school leadership about various issues. And so when this came out, it was big talk. A lot of people had a lot of feelings. And I was very outspoken in this group about how damaging I felt like those people would be as physicians to especially trans patients, but other LGBTQIA patients. And I don't know, I was calling for their heads. I was so upset.
I mean,
and so we as a group sent a response to medical school leadership about what we would like to see them do, how we wanted at our next physician patient society class where we talked about such things, that we wanted recognition that the medical school leadership did not agree with the letter that was sent to them, that they were going to require people to ask for preferred pronouns and names and stuff while they were training. And it was a couple of years ago now, so I don't remember. But I do remember med school leadership not responding in the way that we had hoped that they would. And part of that is not wanting to create this big rift between the students and leadership, and trying to keep the peace as much as possible, and not really, essentially they didn't want to really punish those students. And I understand people grow up different ways, whatever. I'm not trying to I want their head on a stick or sort of thing. But they did talk about it. They sent out an email. They talked about it a little bit during that class about how they did not agree completely, and that they were still requiring people to ask pronouns and stuff. But I remember that we did not feel like they adequately responded to that letter like we hoped that they would.
yeah.
So, there's still a lot of
There's still a lot of work to do.
there's still a lot of work to be done, even at VCU, whose praises I've been singing so far. I do remember we did not really like the way that leadership responded to that whole situation.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand, you have this whole group of students that you don't want to alienate or, feel like you're degrading their religious beliefs and all that
Punishing them
crap.
for their beliefs.
Yeah, okay. But what about everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
You're still driving a wedge because you're not really addressing the core issue, which is their transphobia.
Mm-hmm.
And their refusal to treat actual human beings in the way those human beings need to be treated.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah.
A whole other, I have a lot.
I know you have a lot of questions. Yeah.
I have a lot too, because it really goes back to the we don't want to alienate these people. No, you don't want to alienate them now because that was the norm. You've been alienating LGBTQIA for years and you've had no problem doing that.
Yeah.
And it's
And what do you-
but now the tables are turned and you don't want to do this. It's no, it's just
So
that,
what kinds of doctors are those people going to be when they alienate large swaths of people because of they don't like who they are?
Yeah. It's not a perfect system. There's a lot of work to be done.
Lauren is fighting the good fight from within.
I'm very curious about what those people are going to do in the medical profession. God doesn't make mistakes. Okay, so God gave this guy cancer. You can't fix it then, right?
Yeah.
Like, God
Yeah.
doesn't make mistakes.
There's,
like,
you know, it could,
I'm so. Anyways.
yeah,
okay.
religion and medicine is like a whole other
I
conversation.
feel like
We'll have you back on in October for
Yeah.
yeah,
And-
religion and medicine, how they don't
Yeah,
mix.
and issue another issue is that with that, okay, I kind of put my foot in my mouth. So I was at an event for my MD PhD, you know, whatever. We have a wellness initiative that I used to run. We were at a wellness event. And this came out and I was talking to the people who were there. I'm like, can you believe how awful these people are? Like, I can't believe that anyone would actually think this way enough to write a letter and sign it and send it to medical school leadership. Like, can you even fucking believe these people? And one of the people that I know who's in my program was like, actually, I was one of the authors of that. And I was like,
well, then you're an idiot.
I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I don't know how to get out of this.
I mean,
We ended up having a good conversation about how he feels on that regard and XYZ. But like, it definitely makes me look at him differently, knowing that he was an author on that. I don't know how he feels now. I have not brought it up again. I'm too scared.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense that it would change your view of that person. Like, I mean, that feels like such a, and of course, like, I don't know anything about the situation. I haven't read the letter, but like, it feels like such a degrading and like divisive opinion to have. Like, how can you be a doctor and view other people this way?
Yeah, like you're not correct as a person. You're not a person in my eyes because you're transgender. That's not what people are. That's not what humans are in my mind. Crazy.
Like those two
does
views
not compute.
don't make sense. Like, how can you believe in science and like medicine and doctoring while also saying people can only be one of two things,
Yeah.
and that is it.
And all of the studies, all of the scientific studies that show that there are multiple genders across the animal kingdom and a bunch
and
of different
across
species.
human history.
Yeah,
Like-
it is a known thing that there are multiple
We
genders.
also did a podcast episode on that.
Yeah, multiple genders, multiple sexual orientations. There are so many gay animals. Penguins, frogs, fish, dolphins. There's so many animal species that do not have male-female sexual relationships. And why is it different for people?
Again, another episode.
All right.
All right, we're gonna bring this
Let's
back around.
Another tangent, sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, we could rant all day about it.
Yeah, that was a story I thought was important to bring up.
It is. It's a
It
good
is.
story.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I can't wait to have you on again.
I can talk forever. I can talk about anything.
All right. Do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good.
All right. I think I asked my 2 questions.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's wrap it up.
Very nice.
Lauren, do you have any final thoughts? And it's okay if you don't.
I do.
Okay.
I think I just have a quick wrap up summary.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. I think as people have been more out and more proud about their identification with the LGBTQIA community, just like across the board, there are more physicians and practitioners now who are also out because it is becoming more celebrated to be that way. And so because we are getting, at least at VCU, and I hope across most medical schools, we're getting better education about how to listen to patients and how to include all of their identities and who they are as entire humans and entire people, mentally and emotionally as well as physically, that it is my hope that LGBTQIA medicine, care for those patients, is going to improve. That's my hope. Because not only are people more out in general, and so it is more visible, people's identities, that hopefully practitioners will be more comfortable like wearing pins or, showing that they're open to discussing this with their patients. Patients are going to feel more comfortable discussing it with their practitioners. And our education is going to continue to improve on how to care for patients in the community, even if you don't identify with the community yourself. So I think there's been a lot of good forward momentum in medicine with LGBTQIA involvement in medical education, having organizations at medical schools where students can be out and proud and make decisions with how we are educated about LGBTQIA problems, and the way that medical school leadership alters our education to reflect the things that are important and are being brought to light in the media. It's my hope that these issues that people are facing with not wanting to get medical care because they don't feel heard is going to probably slowly, but diminish over time. That we're going to be better educated to take care of all of our patients, no matter what their identity is, and learn to listen better and to just give better care to a greater percentage of people.
Love that.
So that's my hope.
At the end of that, we should just like put in a round of applause, like, because like it's yes,
Yes, that is the dream.
yes.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of medical schools are going in the right direction, but obviously, yes, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Always
So-
always work to be done.
Always work to be done. It's
Dumpster
always
fire of a country.
it's always up to us to do it.
Sweet. All right. Well, Lauren, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We're so thrilled to have you join us again, and we will have you back again. Hopefully, it won't take a year-ish.
Yeah,
To get
it
you
was
back on
like a
again.
whole year. Yes. Yeah, I will talk about anything that I feel like I have any authority to talk about.
Well, I appreciate your insights and
Yeah.
into the challenges and all of those things, and it really was enlightening, and also it gave me a lot of hope that that we're moving in the right direction. That like you're the next generation of doctors, so that not the
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the government will stop making legislations, making
Yeah.
life-saving procedures illegal.
right.
Looking at you, Texas, Alabama.
That's a whole.
Florida.
We'll have that conversation too. Not in June.
Let's get through Pride Month before we dive into
Yeah.
reproductive care.
Yeah, let's celebrate Pride Month before we get into all of that bullshit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, anything else?
No, I'm just appreciative that Lauren came to share with us today, and
Woohoo!
woohoo! So glad it's Pride Month. Love
Me?
Pride Month.
I love Pride Month.
I love Pride Month. Awesome. That's a wrap.
Woo!
Remember, whether you're lifting weights or lifting each other up, let's keep breaking barriers, building strength, and embracing our rainbow of resilience. Until next time, stay fierce and stay fabulous.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!